I might. Thank you very much.
Except what about the song, music?
You're jumping ahead of
Can't.
yourself. Oh, I can record that because it's my lyrics. Yeah, yeah. That's, what's his name? Weird Al Yankovic was sued, but it proved that, if you do a satire of something, you are not running against copyright law, right? So
Huh.
you might wonder what the heck we're talking about. Well, that's very simple. What we're talking about, of course, is the Mosh theme song. Everybody, sing along. I've been to Romamu, I've been to BJ, I've searched all over for a place to pray. I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in our Zoom. God, there you go, Phyllis. Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Oy vey. A chance to meet you, a chance to greet you, especially the Mosh meetup. A time to deepen what it means to belong. Let's have some fun tonight and spread some joy and light. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Apologies to Neil Young. And since Hoffa's not here, I can't give him credit for playing a harmonica. So whoever that is on the recording, thank you very much for lending your talents to the mosh pit. All right, welcome everybody this evening. Carol Ann Greenberg has joined us, and so is Mel Schnapper, although Mel is hiding behind his silhouette. All righty, this evening, everybody got your book, or at least if you don't, I'm going to be sharing some things with you, but not on my screen, because I'm sharing something else with you on the screen tonight that I'm hoping is going to resonate with you. Hi, Me'ira Bracha. I was about to say good Shabbos, but every time I'm with you, Me'ira Bracha, it's like Shabbos. Mitzi Horowitz, you win twice in one day. Everybody who was here this afternoon for meditation, you win. It's like bingo. So we are now at chapter 3, and I actually had been considering skipping over chapter 3 because it goes back to Tisha B'Av. But I think that it is instructive to take some of the teachings that Rabbi Alan Lu, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory, is giving over to us within this chapter, because otherwise the whole thing doesn't hold together. In other words, the sacred calendar that we live within, that we walk in, we walk in those ways. We will have skipped over that and it won't make as much sense. And he begins to address the topic of Teshuva, which we will get to in more depth in the weeks to come, because this Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh, is the new month of Elul, and that is the 4 weeks preceding Rosh Hashanah. And Reb Deb Smith, do you have a pulpit this year? You do. Excellent. I hope I didn't make you hyperventilate when I just said that we're 4 weeks out.
No, I have actually 2 and 3 that I'm serving for the high holy days. So yeah, it's a bit challenging. Yeah. but I'm all good. I have 1 more to write and I'm finished.
Wow, terrific. I guess I better get started then. Okay, we're starting on page 36. And as we have been doing, if there is a question, a comment, a puzzlement that you have, please don't hesitate to raise your hand virtually or just jump in if I'm looking down at my papers, because again, I see this more as a conversation than a straight, quote unquote, straight teaching. And that includes anything you don't understand. And don't think that anything is too sample, because I guarantee that if you have the question, somebody else has it too. And with that in mind, does anybody know what BJ is that I refer to in the song? Because Deborah Lesk, my dear friend from Canada, you said to me before we started, what's BJ?
Beit Yeshurun?
What's that?
Beit Yeshurun or something?
Beit Yeshurun. It's a
Yes.
shul on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which
Yeah.
really was at the forefront of the revitalization of so much. The rabbis there, the founding rabbis since died, but the amazing rabbis from South America, they really, it was kind of like a Moshe without the breakthrough rooms, but it was the time I've been there twice. It was like going to a Broadway show. Anybody been to BJ? And it was fantastic in a way. It just felt fresh and new, and the music was fantastic. I had like a 10-piece band. Okay, moving right along here. Now that that's BJ. If you want to know more about BJ, just Google it. The sacred calendar on page 36, and I'm beginning with that paragraph, begins each year at Rosh Hashanah. Now, let's remember that Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year. And yet, we do have 4 different New Years. That's why we're the chosen people, because we have so many different opportunities to begin anew. But the sacred calendar, some might say it's actually begins in Nisan with Pesach, or in Tu B'Shvat, the New Year of the trees. But let's take him at his word here, and continues through Yom Kippur. So here's the order of Sukkot, Chanukah, Purim, Pesach, Shavuot, and then finally Tisha B'Av. The cycle of festivals carries us from spiritual purification to gratitude and joy, from spiritual renewal to liberation, and then to revelation. So do you know what he's referring to there? Liberation meaning Pesach, right? Revelation 49 days later to Shavuot. So we're leaving Egypt, and then we're standing on the mountain receiving Torah. That is revelation. From the fullness of the year and its attendant decline and death to a pageant of renewal and rebirth, the reading of the Torah has a yearly cycle as well. Alrighty. The famous question is, why do we read Torah every year, right? It's the same thing every year. Yes, but I'm not the same. I'm different, right? And for those of you who have been tuning into our, Moshe channel, what we do in breakthrough rooms is really to reflect that cycle of the year, that we change, we transform, we have opportunities to see ourselves through the lens of as the Torah returns. The entire Torah read approximately equal weekly portions on Simchat Torah, the very end of this holiday cycle that we're coming up to. The climactic moment of the fall holiday season, the yearly cycle of Torah readings is both completed and begun again in a single reading. So if you go to shul on Simchat Torah, or even if we have something here, we'll read the last psukim, the last few sentences in the book of Devarim, of the book of Deuteronomy, and then start all over again. We'll turn, because, you turn it and turn it and turn it, right? Sometimes it's literally, and sometimes more metaphorically, more psycho-spiritually. The last letter of the Torah is a Lamed, which is the last letter of the Torah, letter of the last word of the Torah, which is Yisrael. All right. The first letter is what? It's Beit, because of Bereshit. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Those 2 letters, the beginning letter and the last letter, spells the word Lev. Lev, meaning heart. All right? So, as you know, every letter of the Aleph Bet has a numerical value. That is called, looking at it, gematria, right? So the numerical value of that word, Lamed Bet, right, of the word Lev, heart, is 32. Now, why am I mentioning that when all he's doing is passing over this for a moment? All right. Is because he does touch on for a second that the sacred calendar traces the path of the soul and the Torah is the path of the heart, right? So if we look at the first letter and the last letter, that is the path of the heart, right? The path of Lev, moving from the beginning to the end. If we look at another word that is equivalent to the word 32 in the Gematria, it's the word kavod, which means honor or glory. There is no glory but Torah, and that is it's an expression. There are also in Kabbalah 32 paths of wondrous wisdom that we learn about in Sefer Yetzirah, which is a mystical and metaphysical framework to the universe, right? And these 32 paths of wisdom are the 32 channels through which we understand Kabbalistically that all we see came into existence, that the divine flow flowed from the Godhead, right? And, you know, all the words I'm using there just were, you know, if I have to explain it, don't ask me to, because, you know, we each have to approach and understand these kinds of concepts for ourselves. But if I understand the Godhead as the source of a river, right, from which everything flows, that is an image that I can go with and that I can buy and I can work with. Alrighty. So there again, there's the number 32. So 32 is an important number in Jewish mysticism. Let's turn now to page. So I'm going to stop for a second. Anybody comment, observation? Because I'm going to skip a few pages now to page 41 when we get to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av. Yes.
Sorry, because I'm not showing my face, I'm having trouble with the whole screen. So I'm confused because you said that Bet is the first letter in the Torah, right, and Lamed is the last. Mm-hmm. And then you went and you turned it around and you made it into Laid.
Right. That's because I'm allowed to, and it's not my teaching. You know, the rabbis are playing with these things all the time, the combinations and permutations of letters of different words. You know, you look at Yud Hey Vav Hey, which is also in permutation. You have Havaya, you have before, is, and it will be, right? So we're allowed to do this hermeneutically. And the fact that I could pronounce that word when I'm this tired is a miracle. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah. So Tisha B'Av comes exactly 7 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, beginning the process that culminates, as we said, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. It is the moment of turning, right? Lashuv. And we know a song, Hashivenu Adonai v'nashuva, right? We will turn to you, we turn to you, return to us as we turn to you. There's kind of like a mutual thing going on. Hey, Rick, welcome. The moment when we turn away from denial and begin to face exile and alienation as they manifest themselves in our own lives. So notice how what he's doing here. I mean, it's not, you know, any great secret that Alan Liu is, from his Buddhist background and from his renewal background, is unpacking everything from a psycho-spiritual lens, right? And I think he says later on, if you don't do that, what's the point, right? What's the point of reading Torah unless you're going to see yourself in the text and invite transformation into our lives? Turning repentance is the essential gesture of the high holiday season, Teshuva. It is the gesture by which we seek to heal this alienation and to find at-one-ment. Have you ever seen the word broken up before? Atonement, at-one-ment. Yeah, and in a few minutes, I'm going to try to confuse myself and you with a sidetrack teaching that I hope you'll find, well, at least exciting, if not meaningful. It is the gesture to find at one moment to connect with God, right? To reconcile with others and to anchor ourselves in the ground of our actual circumstances. I think he's talking here about not getting carried away with our personal narratives, right? And to get trapped locked in to that personal story so that we're not trapped by it. And to anchor ourselves in the ground of our actual circumstances, though it's this reality that shapes our actions and not just the habitual unconscious momentum of our lives. And here he's talking about, for me, the breaks that we need to develop, that we need in our spiritual practice to become aware of those moments that we need to stop and take a breath. I heard a story the other day. I'm a big Tara Brach listener, and she's a teacher of insight meditation. And when I'm listening to her, I'm always translating what she's saying through my Jewish lens. But she tells us, she calls it a folktale, I'm not sure it is, about a man who is running away, trying to escape his shadow. And of course, the faster he runs, the faster the shadow runs. Until finally, he grows so tired, so exhausted, that he settles himself under a large-limbed tree filled with leaves, and there is no more shadow because there is no sun on him, and he's not running, of course, anymore. So for us spiritual directors in the room, I think that's a wonderful teaching about slowing down and finding God in the moment, in our very breaths. And as later in Deuteronomy, it will say, as close as your own breath, as close as your own mouth, right? Yeah, so I'm going to read the Rambam paragraph. Does somebody want to read the Rambam paragraph? You see where I am? Rambam, the great medieval philosopher. And then we're going to take a detour. Mary Rita, please.
Rambam, the great medieval philosopher and synthesizer of Jewish law, said that Teshuva, this kind of moral and spiritual turning, is only complete when we find ourselves in exactly the same position we were in when we went wrong, when the state of estrangement and alienation began, and we choose to behave differently, to act in a way that is conducive to atonement and reconciliation. But this objection was raised. What happens if the circumstances in question don't repeat themselves? How do we make complete Teshuva then? Don't worry, the Rambam replied. They always do. The unresolved elements of our lives, the unconscious patterns, the conflicts and problems that seem to rise no matter where we go or with whom we find ourselves, continue to pull us into the same moral and spiritual circumstances over and over again until we figure out how to resolve them. They continue to carry us into harm's way until we become aware of them, conscious of them, and begin to change them. And we all have recurring motifs in the dark, unresolved corners of our lives. In the domestic unhappiness, we replicate from one marriage to another, in the problems that seem to follow us from one job to the next, in all the mistakes that turn out to be the same mistake, which we make over and over.
Does that resonate with anybody? I'm sure for every single one of us, right? Sometimes Renee and I will turn to each other and say, what were we thinking? It's like, of course, the answer goes unsaid is, well, we weren't. Because it was the same situation, right? That came up, just wearing different clothing. All righty. So this is Reb Deb.
So I don't know whether I heard it here or but I've heard this years ago. My rabbi gave me a little piece of paper one time right before the high holidays, and it was this autobiography in 5 short chapters, Portia Nelson. I walked down the street,
Yep.
and have people heard it? And do you know it? Because I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk, I fall in.
Don't read it.
I'm lost, I'm helpless. Yeah.
Don't read it so fast.
Okay.
Hold on a second, because I was not going to read it tonight, but let me share it as you read it. Hold on a second.
Okay. It's really made a difference, and I've used it every year on the high holy days for the past 13 years for part of my teaching.
Me too.
So it
Go ahead.
goes like this.
Read it.
I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes me forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I am in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street.
Yeah. I love it.
So it's just very meaningful to me, you know.
Me as well, except until somebody pointed out the chapter 6 is that you make the same mistakes on the other street.
Yeah. Yeah, really.
Right.
And it begins again.
Let's admit it. We are all Charlie Brown, trying to kick that football, and Lucy is going to pull it out from underneath us each and every time, unless. Now, I only half joke. I want to share with you a teaching that I studied today. I mentioned it this afternoon in meditation. I have chavruta, people I've been studying with for many, many years. And we usually study Parsha Shavua and the Torah portion of the week, and we never know what we're going to end up studying and which commentator we're going to look like. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And forewarn you that this is for me a tough teaching, and kind of scary too. And the reason why I wanted to share it is because it's about both Teshuva, but it's also about quote unquote sin, which there is no Hebrew word sin. The word is chet, which sometimes we understand as we try our best, but we miss the mark, right? And I want to underscore this with how hard a job this is that Rabbi Lou is talking about, and that the Rambam talks about. Even if we recognize that we're in the same situation, how difficult it is to pull ourselves out of that hole that Deb just shared with us from Portia Nelson's poem. Why people who have been alcoholics remain alcoholics for the rest of their lives and go to AA meetings because they need that support. Not that they're going to fall back, but because the Yetzer Hara, which is also going to make an appearance in this teaching, is always at our doorstep. Sin crouches at our door. It appears in the Cain and Abel story. Alrighty, so I'm going to share this with you. I hope. Let's try to make some sense of it together. Do you see it? Somebody say something. Yes, okay. Because let me see you. There you go. Okay, because I'm looking on a different screen right now. This is from this week's Parsha. And some of the teaching from this week's Parsha is to beware of when we enter the land, the peoples who live there are going to have a different culture. Right? And so we've been warned all along about Avodah Zarah, about idol worship, right? What that is, if you want to take it on the super level of those statues, I understand that it's expanded. If you in the third paragraph of the Shema, we read V'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'yacharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem, that we shouldn't lust after what our eyes see, right? And go from one thing to the next thinking that is going to make me happy and this is going to make me happy, okay? Because you'll lose yourself and become estranged from divinity. So the line in the Parsha is Ki isitcha achicha. If your brother entices you in a secret, and then it doesn't say the rest of this in Hebrew, I didn't put all the Hebrew in, and says, come let us worship other gods. Now it goes on to say not just your brother, but your mother or your children, right? Meaning someone close to you who you look at as a friend who is yourself. So where do you recognize that from? V'ahavta riyacha kamocha. Love your neighbor, your friend as yourself. So this is someone to whom you have not only great attachment to because you're both made b'tselem Elohim in the image of God, but because they are attached, umbilically attached to you, familially already. So this commentary that we're going to now is from the Orat haChayyim. He's an early 18th century Sephardic commentator from Morocco, both a Talmudist and a Kabbalist, and that is a great combination. He says on this line, if your brother entices you to do this, he says in this paragraph, the Torah teaches that enticement to sin is not only due to external sources, in other words, somebody else the devil made me do it, but maybe due to something within us. And I was calling on my red fox, In fact, some force born within us from the day we see the light of day. Whoa. I don't know about you, but I find that troubling. Aren't we born with a neshama tohara, right? Elohai, Elohai, neshama toharahi. Our souls are pure. He's saying at the moment we are born, there is something that is watching us. There is something that, meaning the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, hovering, just waiting for us to do what? Let's continue. There's an additional internal enticer, the spiritually negative force that one creates every time a person sins. This is the mystical dimension of Pirkei Avot, when it says one sin drags another in its wake. So this is a pretty famous line, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, right? You do a good deed, you do a mitzvah, you would do something that attaches you to the utmost, and that is going to be the habit, not the, it's not going to be falling into that hole, right? That in the poem, it's going to be forming other habits that are going to lead to other life-enhancing habits that draw us closer to God, to ourselves, and to each other. Simultaneously, avera goreret avera. That's the very next line in the Mishnah. That one sin drags another in its wake. In other words, you form bad habits, they're not going to be easy to break, and other bad habits will follow. Right? You're going to, if you lie, you very well could become a habitual liar. Right? We all learn from childhood, from our parents or others, how to behave in this world, whether to be menschlichkeit, or whether to be not so. Continuing, Kabbalistically, now we're getting into the mysticism of this, and this is where I'm going with how difficult it is to change our behavior. Kabbalists have talked at length about this subject, explaining that every sin creates an accuser. Remember in, what's this? It's a Wonderful Life? Right? Every time you hear a bell, an angel's created. That's because a good thing is happening. Here, the opposite is happening. creates an accuser, which in turn increases the power of the original evil urge within us. Whoa. So there is an outside force that is increasing the power of what we're doing to ourselves. Whoa. The more a person sins, the more powerful the forces which urge him to sins become. This makes a lot of sense to me. Seeing how people abuse themselves with alcohol, with sex, with cigarettes, with lying, right? With creating false truths. You are what you eat, we used to say, right? This is similar to that. The more a person sins, the more powerful the forces which urge him to sin become. Continuing. There is a third dimension to the personality of a person who indulges in sin. Wow, check this out. By doing so, he or she acquires an additional soul, as it were, just as they have the principle that one who observes Shabbat is granted with an neshama yetera, right? An additional positive force, a soul, on that day. The reverse holds true for the habitual sinner. With regard to the third acquisition, an evil soul which henceforth accompanies the sinner constantly, Moses describes it as Eshet Chekecha. That appears in the same, later on in the same line that we started with. The wife of your bosom, as it now resides inside the sinner and will add to the power of the forces which entice a person to sin. It's kind of like the movie Alien. There is a host. And we are he, she, whatever, it. And we are inviting this outside force in when we schmutz up our kli, our vessel, to that extent. Coming into a landing here. Regarding the fourth element, which entices a person to sin, the opposite of the neshama yetera, the additional soul a Sabbath-observing Jew is equipped with on the Sabbath, the Torah calls it Re'echa asher kenafshecha, your friend who is like your own soul. You know, this the extra soul on Shabbat. It's like a friend, a yedid nefesh. You know, we refer to the friend of the soul. But once the sinner has been softened up by the enticer, the Torah describes the nature of the enticement and invitation to serve alien gods, which of course in the Hebrew is avodah zarah, and we're not going to go into what that means because that's a whole night in itself or more, and a whole tractate of the Talmud.
Can you quote the source? Can you put the source up if I want to look that up?
Of this citation?
Yeah,
yeah,
the whole thing that you read.
You use Sefaria?
Yeah.
Okay, so go to the Parsha, find that that pasuk, which begins with a kisitcha achicha. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
And then you're going to go to the commentaries and find the on that line the Orat haChayyim, the Orat haChayyim. Okay, if you can't find it, just give me a holler. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Deb Lesk? Yeah. Other Deb. We have two Debs.
That's right. Well, I think that what this just says in the very basic sense is that like attracts like. And once you go down a slippery slope, it just keeps on going. And so that's why we have to keep ourselves in balance. Because it's like it snowballs, whichever way you go.
Right. Absolutely true. Avera gereret avera. Mitzvah avera gereret mitzvah. The way we behave, the way we act, the way we find ourselves, and the self-improvements that we do, whatever avenue we take. Exactly what you're saying, for sure. Anybody else before we continue on page 45? Renee. I'm going to, there you go.
Yeah, okay. This is sort of past the beginning of a thought, see if I can get through it. And that is that in my own experience, when I have done something, when I've shouted at someone because I can't stand it any longer, for example, I know at the moment of doing that I feel pretty miserable, but I really want it to look right. And so there is a tendency to insist even further that I am right. Listen to me. And the urge to feel good about what you know isn't good well, I can't finish the sentence. I'm just going to stop there.
No, but we hear you. We hear you. For sure. Page 45.
Yeah. I don't even know if that was relevant.
No, absolutely. It's a living example of what we are grappling with here. The only question worth asking about any conflict, any recurring catastrophe is this: what is my responsibility for it? How am I complicit in it? How can I prevent it from happening again? You just gave an example of that, Renee, right? When things go bad, there's an enormous temptation to blame it on externals. It's his fault, her fault, on the evil of others, or on the unlucky turn of events. Spiritually, however, we are called to resist this temptation, no matter how strong it may be, and no matter how strongly rooted in fact or reason or history it may seem. Spiritually, we are called to responsibility to ask, what am I doing to make this recur again and again? What's my place in this? Even if it is a conflict that was clearly thrust upon me from the outside, how am I plugging into it? What is there in me that needs to be engaged in this conflict? Why can't I just let it slough off me like water off a duck's back, as I am able to do with so many other things? Right? A couple of lines later. So from a spiritual point of view, we need to ask, what can I do here and now in the present tense reality of my own experience? And then you see the word same. Why do our relationships always fail in precisely the same way? Why do we always fall into the same kind of conflict? Why do we always have the same arguments with our children, with our parents? I think we all know the reasons for that, the answers to those questions. Something that I'm going to address, I think the Shabbos, no, maybe the next Shabbos. Well, in any way, was a conversation. Many of you know I just got back from Seattle, where my middle son lives, and I realized he's 37, and my two sons grew up in Israel with their mom from the ages of 8 and 5, and we were talking about trauma. And he was in the Israeli army, and I never asked him before about it, if he had gone through any traumas in the army. And he shared one or two things with me, and the most of which being that he attended many a funeral of a fallen, colleague. And it got me to thinking again, because sometimes even when we do breakthrough rooms, we might have had the topic of trauma, and I'm always hard pressed to name a trauma in my life. Because I think of other people, and comparing myself and saying, well, that this doesn't compare. That's not really trauma. But then I finally embraced it last week. That being separated from my two boys at that age and having them so far away from me was trauma. Now, I share that with you because I've made a conscious decision to heal that trauma. And the way that I'm going to do it, finally, is to really acknowledge that my son, his 37, is not a little boy anymore. He's an adult, right? And as much as I need to heal, I think he needs to know, what I was going through during that time. And because I don't know, what we've never talked about it. And it just feels like it's time, right? So this is a shadow that I've been dragging along for a long, long time. And it wasn't easy coming to the conclusion that I needed to do it. And it may not be easy talking about it. There probably will be tears involved, but I'm hoping that I can, do some Teshuva in that way, own up to my part in it, and not allow that part of my story to hold me in its grip any longer. And it's not even just sense. I have a deep knowing that this is what the work is that we're talking about tonight, and the work of Elul, which is to lessen the grip of that habitual behavior and our story has over us, right? That would be an interesting topic for a breakthrough room, wouldn't it? What is the recurring disaster in our life? Page 46. What is the unresolved element that keeps bringing us back to the same moment over and over again? What it is that we keep getting wrong? What it is that we persistently refuse to look at and fail to see? So now here is why we went back to the chapter on Tisha B'Av, right? That elemental moment in our history that keeps repeating itself over and over and over again, where everything falls apart and we need to put Humpty Dumpty back together. Tisha B'Av is the day on which we're reminded of the calamity that keeps repeating itself in the life of our people. And against all reason, against the overwhelming evidence of history, Moses and the rabbis insist that we're not powerless in the fact of that face of that calamity. I mean, look, we're still here, right? Moses and the rabbis insist that we take responsibility for what is happening to us. Moses, and when he says Moses and the rabbis, what he's saying is based upon the Torah and what actually Moshe is saying to us in the Parsha that we were just discussing. And we acknowledge our complicity in the things to keep happening us over and over again. So going back to the poem, Reb Deb, right? It is my fault, right? It is my fault. What is my fault? Well, the circumstance might not be my fault, but it might be. But it is my fault that I have not wrestled that baby to the ground. That I haven't done the work to really to liberate myself from whatever's holding me, whatever's holding you. Let's stop for a moment. Reb Deb. Unmute yourself, my friend.
Sorry. Okay, I was thinking for a second when I read this chapter to myself, and I made a note in the margin where I said, how to make Tisha B'Av personal, that we, in looking at that, we go down into our own brokenness and really sit in isolation with that so that we can move from the lowest point to the, to start to dig our way, move to a higher point. Because if you think about the symbolism of that time of the year, and so many people, I mean, in my congregants too, they're like, really, Tisha B'Av? Like, so what? Big deal. It's not relevant now. But, if you think about the images of sitting in the brokenness on the floor in the dark with the ashes, I mean, the whole thing. And you think about how, you're sitting in your own personal destruction of your own temple, the temple of your soul, the temple of your heart, or the temple of your life. And how do you sit in that isolation and tolerate that, and then be able to move out of it to a different place and look at why the things get repeated and how to break the cycle of our own complicity in that happening again. It's a very tough, I mean, it's like Yom Kippur. It's just as tough to look at it. But if you start to look at it on Tisha B'Av, you can start to move, forward to get ready for what you need to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And I just want to add to that, first to bookmark that the work of post Tisha B'Av up until Rosh Hashanah for all of Elul is very personal, intense insightful kind of work that we're looking. But when we get to Rosh Hashanah, it's all communal. And if you look at Yom Kippur, She'al shechatanu lefanecha, right? That for the sins that we have committed against you, right? So there is kind of like a movement from the individual to the communal here. We are the world. Pardon the pop culture reference. But yes, sitting in the brokenness is an important. It's an important opportunity, not to avoid our brokenness, but to allow ourselves to sit in it. What if we did that on 9/11? I'm not sure what the date is that we would need, or we had a date, that stores were closed, and it wasn't an opportunity to go shopping. I'm not sure we're capable of it. Shosh, I think Moshe, you want to say something, and then Rick and Elizabeth.
I think we have to be careful and as we sit in our brokenness, to not blame somebody else, which is ironic because we've often said the Jews have been scapegoated our entire history. But what I'm reading here and also on the next page when Blue counters Santayana, is that we have complicity. It's not, there's a lot of things that we have to figure out, what did we do, as you said, that could have caused this? And then we can figure out what can we do now and try to do the next time. But, I think we all have, the Jews always get kicked out of town. Well, what part of that is due to what the Jews did or didn't do?
That is a short question to a very complex answer that we're not going to address right now. The only thing I do want to say, and I've never been on this trip with Norman Fisher. He used to lead a trip to the camps. I think it still is happening. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's it's a witnessing trip, and they're coming through it from a Buddhist perspective. Bernie Glassman. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, never mind. Yeah. So to sit in the brokenness and to be witness to what has occurred is a very powerful thing. And without placing blame, makes it even more powerful and the possibility for transformation. Elizabeth.
Well, I was with this word about fault. It is my fault, and the different flavor that brings for me has a feeling around blame, and it may be just how I'm reacting to it, but it is certainly my responsibility, and that has. It feels as important not to scapegoat myself in the acceptance of it and the bringing the wholeness of who I am to reevaluate and to move forward.
Yeah. Maybe that is a nice drosh that goes along with the lave, of Torah, that one has to be compassionate to their own hearts in order to not escape from the story, but to sit with the story. And then we can be aware of what it's happening still and how it affects us. A lot of wisdom in this room, that's for sure. Deborah, and then Renee, and then we'll continue.
I'm struck by this discussion because Judaism is very wise, because by observing this whole process, people, if they do observe this, have a way of an excuse, a reason, a rhythm, and to actually be introspective and look at things and make changes. And As someone who's just in the last year been through a lot of mental health challenges, I realized that a lot of those kind of situations, those illnesses, are related to the things that have been hidden, the things that haven't been addressed, not necessarily on purpose, not hidden on purpose, but inability to manage certain things. And so what this time of year does, if you follow it, is it teaches you how to have skills to deal with these things. And maybe that can short circuit some of the crises that people who don't do it have on a bigger scale. It's really important, I think.
Absolutely, for sure. Thank you, Renee. And Renee.
There. Oh, first of all, Deborah, I really, really love what you've just said. I want to think about it again. I wish I could have your words to look at again. And maybe related to what I have in mind, which is how do I help someone else who is going through a difficult period of self-blame, a pattern of self-blame, or even a pattern of blind repeated action. And the contrary, not the contrary, but the other side is, sounds if I'm just learning, if I'm one who's just learning this, I would want help. And where do I seek that help? It sounds like a lot of responsibility is put on each of us individually and in isolation. I'm a newbie to this, so I haven't experienced this before. I mean, the progression through the Jewish year.
So we can continue our conversation from yesterday, Renee, if you like, unless anybody would like to respond to that. It's a long, strange trip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I shouldn't use the word strange. It's a journey, and we use the skills that we pick up from our teachers and our mentors, and if we're so blessed, from our children, who teach us how to live in the moment, with radical amazement. That's being on the path I think the simple answer to your question is to be with another person. To the greatest love we can show is to listen. Is what's called the ministry of presence. To really sit and to be witness to another person's story. Yeah, Deb.
A part of what I do is I facilitate a bereavement group. And it's very interesting to me because this topic came up, just wearing different language last week, where people were talking about how guilty they felt that they hadn't done more for the person that they lost. And what was very powerful, I'm just the facilitator, so I don't do any intervention. I am a therapist by profession, but I don't do anything except facilitate the group. But what was very interesting to me was the power of the witnessing that went on when people validated what the people who were expressing themselves said, and they joined with them and they shared their own experiences. And there was just so much healing that went on in watching the witnessing, that I just felt, as a facilitator, I felt so privileged to just be there and be able to watch it happen. So I think maybe that's a part of it that is critical to this time of the year and the work that needs to be done, because it's so isolating to do the repair work of Teshuva and to feel alone in doing it, and how do you connect with other people and other threads to help bind the healing and make it work.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if people have Teshuva buddies. People have chavruta, study partners of all different kinds, but perhaps it's an idea that's already happening, or times has come, because yes, it's a very lonely path.
Because if you think about the things that people maybe want to make a turning from and address to other people, how hard is it to hold, it's excruciating to do the work. It's terrible to sit in the isolation and then to have to propel yourself forward and then, sort of process with yourself. It is almost impossible. And I think that's why people often avoid it, because it is so difficult to do and it is very humbling to do. And you need like more energy than you can sometimes muster up by yourself.
Yeah.
So if you had a partner to witness with you and to share in that, it might be very helpful. So
Absolutely.
Sounds like a good idea to me. It sounds like a plan.
Well, if anybody wants to follow up on this, let me know, and I'll put you together with somebody else who wanted to look into this. Page 50, and I'm gonna try to weave these comments together with the next paragraph, and with my dream for what Moshe would be from the very beginning and how that has evolved. I wonder how many of us are holding on very hard to some piece of personal history that is preventing us from moving on with our lives and keeping us from those we love. I think I just shared a little personally about that. I wonder how many of us cling so tenaciously to a version of the story of our lives in which we appear to be utterly blameless and innocent, that we become oblivious to the pain we've inflicted on others, no matter how unconsciously or inevitably or innocently we may have inflicted it. I wonder how many of us are terrified of acknowledging the truth of our lives because we think it will expose us. Some of you know that one of my dreams from the very beginning, even before the pandemic, was to create or help to create a community that people did this, right? That they shared the greatest intimacy with each other and felt safe about doing that. And lo and behold, the pandemic comes along and breakthrough rooms are born, renamed them by our friend Jay Smith. And this is what happens, I think. And it's a miracle that we've created the safety and the confidence within these rooms for people to be authentically themselves and to do this, to acknowledge the truth of their lives and expose yourselves to others. And that's a scary thing in the real world. And we've created an alternate reality that is more real than the real world, and it's holy. And I thank you all for that and being on this journey and helping me co-create this. Forgiveness, it has been said, means giving up our hopes for a better past. Many of us refuse to give up our version of the past and find it impossible to forgive ourselves or others. Absolutely. And the acknowledgement, I'm on page 50. Tisha B'Av is the beginning of Teshuva, the process of turning that we hope to complete on Yom Kippur, the process of returning to ourselves and to God, which, by the way, that's a whole other complex theological quandary, I think, that we all need to answer. What does that mean? Returning to ourselves and to God, right? Like I said before, are we born, as the commentator says, in that moment that we hit the light with, being ready to be pounced on the moment we make, a wrong move? There is in the last lines from Eov, right? Which are used for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Hashivenu Adonai Lecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. We shall return to, help us return to you and turn to us in the process. But I'm looking at the last part of the sentence. Chadesh yameinu kekedem. Renew our days like in days of old. Kekedem. What does that mean? Is that what we're talking about? And what does it mean to return to days of old? Does that mean to return to before there was time itself? Before there was a before? Before Bereshit bara Elohim? Before the first Beit? Before the first line of Torah? You know, the Midrash says that Teshuva is one of the 10 things that was embedded in the nature of reality before divinity began to create the world. What are we returning to? And how will we know ourselves when we get there? That's another answer, I think, that we can do some discernment about, right? And can only find that in moments, the kol d'mamad daka, in the still, quiet voice, right? Meir bracha.
I think what that means is return to a state of being in the Eden.
Being what? I'm
being
sorry.
in Eden.
Eden?
Gan Eden.
Gan Eden. Okay, so what does that mean for you?
Well, that means that we were pure and innocent.
Until the whole time?
Oh, no, until the snake convinced Eve to eat that fruit.
So then we lost it and we were still in Eden. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, in a state of nakedness. Remember interestingly, that's interesting they bring that up, because after they eat from the fruit, then they realize they're self-conscious, they're conscious of self, and then they have to cover their nakedness.
Yeah.
And we just talked about, Alan Liu just said that none of us, I wonder how many of us are terrified of acknowledging the truth of our lives because we think it will expose us, right? It will expose that we've been naked all along, right? We've been naked all along, but it takes a lot of courage to live out of that place. All right, we're coming in for a landing here. The psalmist promises us, and on page 50, the guardian of those who struggle to know God never slumbers or sleeps. He will protect you. God will protect you. Yudhev Yahweh will not let the sun smite you by day, nor the moon by night. Does this ring a bell for anyone? The Psukim, Mary, read it. Do you know where from? What psalm it is?
121.
Actually, it's Psalm 91. Do you see it in 20? Did you find 21? Is it the same thing in 21? It's possible.
No, 121.
121. Here, and I thought it's Psalm 91. Well, we're gonna.
It's one of my favorite psalms, so, and I pray it every night before I go to bed.
Okay. Would somebody look it up, because I think it's 91, but 121 is Esa Enai, if I'm not mistaken.
It is a psalm of ascent, but
Yeah, and
as it goes on, it talks about that the guardian neither slumbers nor sleep, and the sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night, and it could be a 91. I always
because he does repeat certain motifs in different psalms. So thank you. I'm going to actually look when we're done.
It's 121. The other one was 91.
I always think 91. Yeah, I always
91 is the bedtime psalm. Maybe you have a different siddur than I do. But anyway, let's get to the psukim, which says, so God is protector, right? And the psalm says, Ki hu yitzilcha mipach yakish. I think I pronounced it right. That God will save you from the snare trap, right? From getting caught like in a bear trap, a trap that traps animals. So we get caught in our habitual behavior. And I never realized, I didn't put two and two together till this year. Rereading Alan Liu is always worth it. And these lines, and the bedtime Shema of asking that we not fall into the same habitual behavior over and over and over again, that tomorrow's going to be different. I forget what pasuk, some famous rabbi, a student said to him, you say the same thing every night. and the rabbi said, yeah, but tonight I really mean it. And then it goes on to say, Be'evrato yesech lach, with God's wings will be over you, and beneath God's wings will cover you. So there is the shade. right? There is the protection, and like sitting under the shade tree and stopping, right? That the shadow's not chasing us anymore, and pausing in that wonderful moment of recognizing the behavior, saying, I'm not going to step down that anymore. And as Rambam says, it repeats over and over and over again, just like the Torah does, so do we. So thank you. I'm going to go take a look quickly at Psalm 121, Mary Rita. I'm not doubting you because, like I said, he does have similar themes in different Psalms. All righty. Let's open up any questions, reservations, reflections. And next week, I'll send out in the next email what we're going to be covering. And just as a little treat, the following week, Shulamit's going to do a teaching on giving blessings. And that should be really nice because it's something that we've come to do every Shabbat morning in the breakthrough rooms, to offer blessings to each other. Anything anybody wants to share about tonight? It was a lot. What is the work? How do we do this now? And I will be, we'll be unpacking, practices. If you have one that works for you, please. If you do Musar work, for instance, and you have a writing practice that works, or any other kind of spiritual practice, it's all about, the rabbis talk about, say 100 blessings, brachot a day. It means, to live an intentional life, right? Nothing more, nothing less. And it ain't easy. To quote Ringo Starr. Okay, Moshe.
I don't have an answer for that, but I was very enthralled by the Lou's description of the rhyming and cyclic nature of the Torah calendar, the lunar calendar, the Roman calendar, and the role that rituals play in weaving this. And I guess I never got that sense of how wonderfully, it was constructed. And that there really is a reason for going through these rituals, because they create, this circle and of liberation, all the different words, but the concept of and he uses the term rhyming, how this all sort of fits together, that made me kind of appreciate Torah a little bit more and rabbinic thought more.
Yeah, beautiful. And you're seeing the calendar as a circle, right? And remember last week's teaching, Rabbi Soloveitchik, it seems like on the circumference of a circle that we're getting further away from where we start, but actually we're getting closer to where we're returning, right? And the other thing that strikes me as symbols throughout religious cultures, the symbolism of Mandela and a labyrinth, they're all circles that lead us to the center, or they remind us of something that we should be living our lives by. That would make it a heck of a lot easier. Deborah, I'm going to ask Carol Ann first. And I'm going to unmute Carol Ann.
Thank you. This was a very powerful evening for me, particularly. And I want to say that it is very helpful to have a spirit buddy or a spiritual advisor, as I so wisely decided to try to have almost a year ago, I think, in the spirit of Mary Rita, and also in working with the Wisdom Circle and doing this work that we just did with Eliana. A lot of it was on forgiveness, which wove in what we did tonight beautifully. And I just can't thank you enough for this. And I couldn't help but relate to Renee's comment. I wrote to her in the chat that I want to share a specific thing in my personal life that I would acknowledge what she was saying philosophically, or, without an example.
Carol Ann, you're tzodeket. You're a wise and gracious and generous human being. And I'm so delighted that you and Renee are going to touch base.
Thank you.
Deborah, call us home. Kind of, metaphorically.
Oops, wait a minute.
I just unmuted you.
Oh, okay. I said, come home to Canada. There are other things that are round too, like onions, and you peel off the layers. And that's so, as when you said that, it tied up what I wanted to say, which is I just get so excited about discussions about change and growth and things to do and spiritual and growth and mental growth, and this is just, I love this. And so when you talked about the circles, really it is, we're peeling the layers back and getting to know who we are more. And I think that that's just phenomenal. And I love being in a class where people are enjoying talking about this.
Me too. All right, I can't help myself, but let's sing our way out tonight. And I found the song I want to sing. All my, that's Becky. All my life's a circle. Oh, wait a second. I can't do that. Hold on. Wait a second. I need to ask our friendly lady to stop the recording.